Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. In this lecture series, I want to focus on something specific relating to conflict management called crucial conversations. Crucial conversations, you'll learn what they are, but essentially are ones that you'll use as a way to manage conflict. I was influenced, and this whole lecture is influenced by a book called Crucial Conversations, which I would say is probably one of the best communication books that I've read from a mainstream press. Definitely top 5, probably top 3 best books. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People's always like a number 1, and Influenced by Robert Cialdini is always up there too. But Crucial Conversations is another great book. And this lecture series is going to give you a lot from that. And you'll be able to have difficult conversations with people by the end of this series. So let's get to it. Now, when we talk about conflict management, let's just first take a moment to reflect a little bit on conflict scenarios. So I want you to think of an interpersonal conflict that you have been in lately. And then just take a minute to write down the following features of the conflict. Who was it with? What was the topic of the conflict? Did you try talking to your partner about the conflict? And why or why not? If you did talk to your partner, how did the conversation go? And if you did not, how have you been coping with the conflict? So go ahead and just take a minute and write these things down and reflect on just a recent conflict episode that you've been in. I'll go ahead and pause the video to give yourself some time. Okay. There's probably a lot of scenarios that we could talk about when we talk about conflict management, especially in an interpersonal or professional communication context. Here are some common conflict episodes that you might have came up with. For example, you might have thought of ending a relationship. Perhaps you've had to transform something with somebody. Or maybe you're dealing with a coworker's behavior. So maybe some coworker's annoying you or a coworker's offending you, those kinds of things. Or you're addressing a roommate's behavior. Maybe there's some roommate that you have right now who is doing something that you don't like them doing. Or maybe you're a parent and you're dealing with a rebellious teenager of some kind. And your teenager is all, just acting old and, thinks they're independent now and all those things. And you have to still remind them that there are rules. Some of you maybe are parents or will be parents someday. All of these episodes will, at some level or at some point, you will probably want to have some kind of resolution to these episodes. Whatever you put down, some of you may have even said you have tried to resolve it. And maybe you tried to have a conversation about it, or maybe you tried to hint towards your partner, hey, this isn't cool. And maybe you had some success, maybe you didn't. Maybe some of you, though, haven't even tried to deal with it. Maybe you're too afraid, like you're afraid of confrontation. That's where a lot of people are, is they're afraid of confrontation. And so they just let conflicts persist, and they never do anything about it. But because this is a communication class, what we're going to teach you, and what I'm going to try to teach you in this lecture series, is how to actually have those conversations. So you don't always have to live in conflict, and you can learn how to solve them constructively. So how do we do that? Well, first, let's understand what a crucial conversation is. So in any of the conflicts that you picked, there's probably some kind of consequence that your partner is having on you that you perceive to be as negative. And so what you're wanting to do is you're going to want to be able to talk to your partner about this conflict. So what you're going to want to be able to have is what we call a crucial conversation. So what is a crucial conversation? A crucial conversation is a conversation where you might have differing opinions or varying opinions. So if you have a roommate and your roommate is doing something that they think is okay, but isn't okay for you, you're going to have varying opinions on that. Or maybe your coworker is doing something that you don't think is appropriate, but to them it's appropriate. So you might have varying opinions there. That's the first aspect of a crucial conversation, is you're dealing with situations where there may be varying opinions. Now, they may not necessarily be directly oppositional, but they can vary. Secondly, another aspect of crucial conversations is that these are going to be conversations where the stakes are high. So something is at stake. And it can be something along the lines of your peace of mind. It could be money. It could be some kind of big opportunity. It's going to be a situation where you really do care about the outcome. So another way of saying stakes are high is you really care about the outcome of this conflict. These consequences are real. It's not just like Mark chews with his mouth open every once in a while. It's like, no, Mark chews with his mouth open and he embarrasses me in public. Okay, this is like high level stuff here. Okay, so stakes are high. And then lastly, emotions run strong. So in a crucial conversation, you're going to be dealing with conversations where there will be some emotions potentially. Perhaps negative emotions, perhaps positive emotions, maybe by the end. If the conversation goes well and if you do a crucial conversation really well, like there should be positive emotions at the end of the conflict. But either way, you're going to feel like there's going to be emotions involved. Like you're emotionally invested in this, or maybe the partner who you're talking to is emotionally invested. So there's going to be some emotional element. And this is the reason why some people are afraid to deal with conflict, because they're afraid of the emotions. Now, whatever conflict situation that you selected earlier, one thing that I think people tend to believe is what the authors of Crucial Conversations call the fool's choice. The fool's choice basically says this: I have to choose between either being honest with my partner or threatening the relationship. So if I tell my partner that being obnoxious in public is hurting my reputation, I can't do that. I can't tell them that, because even though I'm being honest, it's going to hurt their feelings and they're going to want to end the relationship. Or my coworker is doing something that I think is inappropriate, but if I tell them, then they're not going to want to be my coworker anymore, and it's going to ruin the relationship. Coworker's going to hate me. I'm going to get fired. Everyone, and I'm going to get sand kicked in my face at the recess, and all this stuff. Okay. So people tend to think you have to choose between being honest and being in a relationship with someone. But that is what we call the fool's choice, because it is a false choice. You can still communicate honestly while still maintaining the relationship at the same time, if you know how to do it properly. So you can have as honest of a conversation as you want with someone. You can say how you really want to feel, or how you really do feel, and how you want to feel, and how you want things to be. And you can still keep the relationship at the same time, and you can still keep the relationship intact, and perhaps make the relationship even more close and intimate if you hold the conversation properly. Okay, so how do I hold the conversation properly? Well, according to Crucial Conversations, and this was big, this is really big, when I read the book and it was like, okay. So if you want to be able to have difficult conversations with people, a lot of people think it comes down to content, and you have to just say this right thing this right way. But rather, you can have any kind of conversation with anyone if you learn how to create the context rather than the content. So crucial conversations, to be successful, are not about content per se, but they're about context. If you set up the right context for a difficult conversation, you can have a conversation about anything, regardless of the content. So establishing the context is the key to having a difficult conversation about any content. And that's what Crucial Conversations and what I'm going to be teaching you is about, is how do you create a context so then you can talk about anything that you want and it's going to be okay. Okay, so this context. Well, tell me more about this context then. Okay. The context that you have to create is a context of safety. Now, you have to establish safety before you have the conversation. When you establish safety, and I'll teach you how to establish safety later, then your partner will feel safe to then open up. You'll feel safe to be receptive to what your partner says. And then you can have that honest dialogue, and then things can happen. And then good things can happen. And you can hug it out, you can work it out, and all of these things. Okay, so how do I create safety? And how does this all come together? Well, it all happens through this idea of dialogue. And dialogue is just simply the free flow of meaning between two people. So people who are good at dialogue know how to make it safe for people to add their side of the story, or to, as the authors of Crucial Conversations say, add their meaning to the shared pool. Okay, so the shared pool is the shared pool of meaning between you and your partner. So what you have to do is create a sense of safety within your partner through dialogue, so then they open up to have more dialogue. So the thing is, and this is what makes conflict difficult, is that there are these dialogue killers. So dialogue killers are these things that stop us from opening up to each other and make it so that I don't feel safe to then dialogue with you about anything. So what are some of these dialogue killers? Well, winning. If you have the wrong motive for entering the dialogue, then you're going to kill it by nature. One of those motives is the motive of winning, where you just want to prove the person wrong, or you just want to prove the person guilty, or you just want to hurt the person, okay? Or you just want to win. You just want the person to acquiesce to your side, to agree with you, and to just do everything that you want. It's about winning, okay? That's not a dialogue, because all you're seeking to do is to convey your side and then just not care about what the other person says except to prove it wrong, so you can say I'm right and you're wrong. That kills dialogue. Another thing that kills dialogue is a motive of punishing, where you feel like the reason that you're going to have this conversation is so they can feel punished. So you're wanting to harm the individual. You want them to pay the price for what they did. So let's say maybe you have like a partner who's embarrassing you in public. So you want to have a dialogue where you're punishing them, okay? And you just want them to feel bad, and you want them to feel hurt, and then you want them to apologize, and you want them to write you an apology letter, and you want them to go to everyone and go on Dr. Phil and say I'm sorry and all this stuff, okay? So you just want them to do stuff for you, okay? You want them to feel bad, okay? That's not dialogue. The third killer of dialogue, of course, is avoiding. And that's what a lot of people do, is rather than having the dialogue, they just avoid it altogether, and because they don't want to rock the boat, because, you know, that's hard. And so that, of course, kills dialogue too. So you have to establish safety with your partner. And to do that, you have to be willing to open dialogue. But if you come in with the wrong motives and the wrong reasons, then that's going to kill your ability to open dialogue. And your partner is going to see through it all, and then they're not going to want to open up either. Because if you come in with a winning mentality, I'm here to win, it's going to be conveyed in how you talk to your partner, and then your partner is going to perceive you as just wanting to win, and then they're just going to want to win. And then if they see that you're just trying to punish them, they're just going to try to punish you. And if you're just avoiding the conflict, then they're just going to avoid the conflict. And then see, you get into a conflict cycle. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. To get yourself in the right mindset then for dialogue, you have to be in a mindset where the most important thing to you in the dialogue is doing what's best for the relationship. Not what is doing best for myself, or doing what is best for the other person. What is best for the relationship? Okay? Now, safety is important then. You have to create safety to have this dialogue, and you have to create a sense of you wanting to have dialogue to create a sense of safety. So we kind of see how these two relate to each other. Now, there are common responses that people have when they don't feel safe. So one of the reasons it's hard to have difficult conversations is because we don't establish safety first. And when we don't establish safety first, the other person sees you as a threat, and then they see whatever you're telling them as a threat to them, and then they react in threat response ways that escalate the conflict and make those conflict conversations so difficult and scary and unproductive and Jerry Springer-like. There are two categories of common threat responses that people tend to have. First, silence. So some people, they'll give you the silence kind of approach, the silent treatment, if you will. and then violence. Some people will react violently. And let's break these down a little bit so you can understand what that means. When people respond with silence, here's what they tend to do. They either mask their true emotions. So they don't show their true opinions because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they don't want to offend you, or they don't want to rock the boat. So they'll understate things, or they'll leave out a certain feeling that they're feeling because they don't want to, they feel threatened, so they don't want to escalate more. So they're going to understate everything and not say what they really feel. And they may even just say what you want to hear, but then not really want to change. Some people will just completely avoid topics. So this is where you get into topic avoidance. So if you say, I really want to talk about your hygiene. Maybe you're having an intervention with your roommate about their hygiene. This is real. I've had college students, who have said their roommate stinks, essentially. And so they want to know how to have a conversation with the roommate about their hygiene. Okay. So if their roommate feels threatened, they may avoid this topic because maybe it's a really sensitive thing and that you're coming from a threatening angle. And so they're going to not want to open up about the topic. So they're just going to avoid it altogether and try to change the subject. Or they'll just withdraw entirely. When somebody withdraws from conflict, they leave the room. Like they hang up the phone, they don't reply to the text, they just get the heck out of there. So we don't want people doing any of these things because you can't have meaningful dialogue if people are masking, if people are avoiding, and definitely if they're withdrawing. But then some people react with violence. And so this is what makes it scary for some people because we're always afraid people are going to act violently. So some people, when they feel threatened in a conflict conversation where safety isn't established, they're going to start controlling the conversation. So they're going to start forcing their views on you. They're going to start dominating the conversation. They're going to start cutting you off. They're going to start yelling at you. They're going to speak in absolutes. They're going to say, you never do this, and you're always wrong, and you're the devil, and all that stuff. So all this very controlling, violent language that's not fun to be around. Or they'll start labeling you. So they might call you a stereotype or a category. Well, you're just a nosy person. Peeping Tom, Curious Kathy, all that stuff. So they just start calling you names, and it's just not fun to be called names. Okay? And it just it's not productive for dialogue when you label people. Or they just start attacking you. So they start making you the aggressor, and they start making it sound like you're the one who has the problem. Or so I think that's called gaslighting, when you point out a problem, but they make you feel guilty for having the problem, right? So that's one thing that they might do. Or they might threaten you, or they might belittle you. Well, you're not that important anyways. You have problems too. I don't know why you're attacking me when you have and they just go on the offense, basically. They just counterattack you because they think you're attacking them. So we don't want any of this. We don't want any of this when we try to have a crucial conversation where emotions are high, opinions vary, and stakes are high, and there are real consequences here. So, in summary, we want to first reject the fool's choice. The fool's choice is, I have to choose between being honest and keeping the relationship. That is completely false. You can totally have a conversation about anything if you just know how to create safety. You do that by creating a sense of dialogue and establishing that this is a safe environment for you to share your opinions. So dialogue is the key to establishing safety and to also having the crucial conversation itself. And that comes through pure motives. You have to have the right motives to be able to have dialogue. And then you can create safety. Now, you've probably been wondering, well, how do I create safety? Okay. In the part 2 of applying crucial conversations, we're going to go into the how-to of how to create safety, how to tell your story, and how to basically have the conversation with some key talking points so that you can have a meaningful dialogue with the person that you're in the conflict with and hopefully come out of it with a actionable solution and a more intact relationship. So watch part 2 for how to do that.